The yellowed edges of the photograph caught Mia's attention as she sorted through the old cardboard box in her parents' attic. The August heat pressed down, making the confined space feel like a pressure cooker, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the image that had slipped from between the pages of a dusty photo album. Her mother, Sarah, looked radiant, younger and more carefree than Mia had ever seen her. The stranger standing next to her had his arm draped casually around her shoulders, both of them laughing at some long-forgotten joke. But it wasn't their obvious intimacy that made Mia's breath catch in her throat. It was the man's features, the distinctive curve of his nose, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She'd seen those same features every day for the past 17 years, reflected in her younger sister Ellie's face. The timestamp in the corner read June 1989, less than a year before Ellie was born. Mia's hands trembled as she held the photograph closer to the weak light filtering through the attic window. The resemblance was undeniable. Her sister, the spitting image of this unknown man, looked nothing like their father, John. "Mia? Are you still up there?" Her mother's voice drifted up from below, startling her. "Lunch is ready." "Coming." Mia called back, quickly slipping the photograph into her back pocket. Her heart pounded as she descended the attic stairs, mind racing with implications she wasn't ready to face. Sarah was bustling around the kitchen, laying out sandwiches and iced tea. She looked up with a smile that faltered slightly when she saw Mia's expression. "Everything okay, sweetheart? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Mom," Mia began carefully, pulling out the photograph, "I found something interesting while I was organizing the old photos." She placed it on the counter between them, watching her mother's reaction closely. The change was instant and dramatic. All color drained from Sarah's face as she stared at the image. Her hands, reaching for the plate of sandwiches, froze mid-motion. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. "Where did you find this?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "In the attic." "Mom, who is he? He looks exactly like Dash." "It's nothing," Sarah cut her off sharply, snatching up the photograph and crumpling it in her fist. "Just an old friend from college. It doesn't mean anything." "Mom, come on. I'm not blind. He looks exactly like Ellie." "Who is he?" "I said it's nothing." Sarah's voice rose, edged with panic. "Drop it, Mia. Some things are better left in the past." The back door slammed, making them both jump. John stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him, his wife clutching a crumpled photograph, his daughter's accusing stare. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Dad," Mia turned to him, desperate for answers. "Do you know who this man is? The one in the photo with Mom?" John's eyes flickered to the photograph in Sarah's trembling hands, then away. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. The sound of his study door closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mia watched him go, shock and hurt warring in her chest. Her father had never walked away from a direct question before. His silence spoke volumes. "Mom, please," she tried one last time. "We deserve to know the truth." Sarah smoothed out the crumpled photograph with shaking fingers. For a moment, Mia thought she might finally break her silence. Instead, she tore the photo into tiny pieces and let them flutter into the trash. "Some truths," she said quietly, "can destroy a family. Let it go, Mia. Please." But Mia couldn't let it go. As she watched her mother mechanically begin clearing away the untouched lunch, she made a silent vow. She would find out who the mystery man was, no matter the cost. Because the alternative, living with this suffocating weight of secrets and lies, was unbearable. From upstairs came the sound of Ellie's music, her sister completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. Mia felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Should she tell Ellie what she'd discovered? Or was her mother right? Were some truths better left buried in the past? The pieces of the torn photograph seemed to mock her from the trash can. One fragment showed the man's smiling eyes, so like Ellie's. Another captured her mother's carefree laugh, preserved in a moment before secrets and lies had carved deep lines around her mouth. Mia slipped her hand into the trash and retrieved the pieces, carefully wrapping them in a napkin. She had made her choice. The truth, however painful, was worth fighting for. She just hoped their family would survive the fallout. Ellie pressed her back against the wall outside her parents' bedroom, heart thundering in her chest. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the raised voices had drawn her from her room like a moth to flame. Now, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as her parents' argument filtered through the closed door. "She's asking questions, John. What are we supposed to do?" Her mother's voice cracked with desperation. "We stick to the story. We've managed for 17 years. And what happens when she finds out? When they both find out? My God, John, have you seen how she looks at us now? Like she knows. She doesn't know anything." Her father's voice rose sharply. "And she won't, unless you crack under the pressure. Pull yourself together, Sarah. We made this choice for a reason. We made this choice because we were young and scared. But Ellie deserves. Ellie deserves parents who love her, which she has. Don't you dare risk everything now. Don't you dare destroy what we've built." Ellie's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, hands pressed against her mouth to stifle any sound. The conversation continued, but the words blurred together, drowned out by the roaring in her ears. What choice? What were they hiding? And why did hearing her name in that context fill her with such nameless dread? Heavy footsteps approached the door. Ellie scrambled to her feet and fled down the hallway, nearly colliding with Mia coming up the stairs. "Whoa, where's the fire?" Mia steadied her sister, then frowned at Ellie's pale face. "Hey, what's wrong?" Ellie grabbed Mia's arm and dragged her into the nearest room, their father's study. The leather-bound books and heavy wooden desk usually gave the space a comforting gravitas, but now the room felt suffocating. "I heard them arguing," Ellie whispered, pacing between the desk and the window. "Mom and Dad. About me. About some choice they made when they were young. Mia, something's wrong. Really wrong." Mia's expression shifted, guilt and determination warring across her features. She pulled something from her pocket, a napkin containing what looked like pieces of a torn photograph. "I found something yesterday," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure whether to tell you, but maybe you should see this." Together, they pieced the photo together on their father's desk like a macabre puzzle. When the image became clear, Ellie staggered back, gripping the edge of the desk for support. That's Mom, but who?" She leaned closer, studying the man's face. Something about him seemed familiar, like looking at her own reflection through a funhouse mirror, distorted but recognizable. "The photo's from 1989, Mia said softly. "A few months before you were born." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Ellie shook her head, denial rising like bile in her throat. "No. No, you're not suggesting. Dad is my father. He has to be. No." Ellie swept the pieces of the photograph onto the floor. "This is crazy. You're crazy. Why would you even think dash?" "Because I've seen how Dad looks at you sometimes," Mia cut in, her voice gentle but firm. "Like he's searching for something in your face. Because Mom nearly had a breakdown when I showed her this photo. Because they're upstairs right now, arguing about some choice they made 17 years ago, right when you were born." Ellie sank into their father's leather chair, the familiar creaking sound suddenly alien and wrong. Everything felt wrong, like the world had tilted on its axis when she wasn't looking. "What do we do?" she whispered. Mia knelt beside the chair, gathering the scattered photo pieces. We find out the truth. Together. No more secrets, no more lies. Are you with me? Before Ellie could respond, the study door swung open. Their father stood in the doorway, his face ashen as he took in the scene, the torn photograph on his floor, his daughter's guilty expressions, the echo of his private conversation still hanging in the air. "Dad," Ellie began, but the word caught in her throat. Had she ever had the right to call him that? John's hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was cold and distant in a way they'd never heard before. "Both of you. Living room. Now." But as they followed him down the hallway, Ellie caught Mia's eye and nodded slightly. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The time for secrets was over. The confrontation in the living room never happened. Their father had received an urgent call from work and left, leaving the silence in the house to grow thick and oppressive. That was 3 days ago. Since then, Mia had been on a mission, methodically tracking down every relative who might know something about her mother's past. "Aunt Caroline hung up on me," Mia reported, pacing her bedroom while Ellie sat cross-legged on the bed. "Actually hung up. When have you ever known Aunt Caroline to cut short a conversation? The woman usually talks for hours." "What exactly did you ask her?" "I mentioned Mom's college years, that guy in the photo." She went dead silent, then said she had to go and clicked off. Mia ran her fingers through her hair in frustration. They're all protecting her. Uncle David claimed he couldn't remember anything about that time. Grandma Ruth said she'd call back and never did. It's like hitting a wall of silence everywhere I turn. Ellie hugged a pillow to her chest, her voice small. "Maybe we should stop. Maybe Mom was right about leaving the past alone." "Are you serious?" Mia whirled to face her sister. "Don't you want to know the truth?" "Of course I do. But look what it's already doing to everyone. Dad hasn't spoken more than 2 words to any of us since that day. Mom looks like she hasn't slept in weeks. And I." Ellie's voice cracked. "I can't even look at myself in the mirror anymore without wondering whose features I'm really seeing." Mia sat beside her sister, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Which is exactly why we need to know. This secret has been poisoning our family for 17 years. The only way forward is through." A soft knock at the door made them both jump. Their mother stood in the doorway, looking older than her years in the harsh afternoon light. "Girls. Your father and I would like to talk to you." They followed her downstairs, exchanging nervous glances. John sat in his armchair, staring out the window with the same distant expression he'd worn for days. Sarah perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We know you have questions," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. "But there are things you don't understand. Then help us understand," Mia interrupted. "Who is he, Mom? The man in the photo?" "That's enough." John's voice cut through the room like a knife. "This discussion is over. I won't have you interrogating your mother about ancient history." "Ancient history?" Mia stood, anger finally breaking through her careful control. "This isn't ancient history, Dad. This is our lives. Our family. We deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" John laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I have loved both of you since the day you were born. The truth is that I have worked every day of my life to give you everything you needed. The truth is that family is about more than blood, and some questions are better left unasked." "John, please," Sarah reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I'm going to the office." He stood abruptly. "I can't do this right now." After he left, Sarah buried her face in her hands. Ellie moved to comfort her, but Mia wasn't finished. "I found something else," she said quietly, pulling an envelope from her back pocket. "While you were all avoiding me, I went through the old boxes in the attic again. Letters, Mom. Between you and someone named Thomas. Sarah's head snapped up, her face draining of color. Where did you get those? They're love letters. From 1989. He writes about how much he misses you, about the plans you made together. About how he knows you're making the right choice, even though it's breaking both your hearts. Mia's voice shook. The last one is dated 2 months before Ellie was born. Ellie stood frozen, watching her mother's face crumple. The truth was written there, clear as day, in the tears tracking down Sarah's cheeks. I was going to tell you, Sarah whispered. So many times, I wanted to tell you. But as the years passed, it got harder and harder to find the right moment. How do you tell your child that everything they believe about themselves is? She couldn't finish the sentence. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift from John's parents, Mia remembered suddenly. How many family gatherings had that clock witnessed? How many celebrations and arguments and quiet Sunday afternoons? How many lies? His name, Sarah finally continued, was Thomas Bennett. And he was. The front door slammed open, making them all jump. John stood in the doorway, his face thunderous. Not another word, Sarah. Not one word. But the damage was done. The name hung in the air between them, Thomas Bennett, and nothing would ever be the same again. The revelation of Thomas Bennett's name had shattered what remained of their family's fragile peace. John had moved into the guest room, communicating only through clipped sentences and closed doors. Sarah spent her days in a fog of anxiety and regret, jumping at every phone ring and envelope in the mail. But it was the growing distance between Mia and Ellie that hurt the most. I don't want to know anymore, Ellie declared one evening, standing in Mia's doorway with her arms crossed. I've asked Mom to stop you from digging into this. Mia looked up from her laptop, where she'd been searching social media for any trace of Thomas Bennett. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Look what this is doing to our family. Dad can barely look at me. Mom starts crying every time I walk into a room. And you. Ellie's voice cracked. You're obsessed. It's like nothing matters to you except exposing this secret, regardless of who it hurts. I'm doing this for you. No, you're doing this for yourself. Because you can't stand not knowing something. Because you think you have some moral high ground about truth and lies. Ellie's words came faster, angrier. But did you ever stop to think that maybe, just maybe, Mom and Dad had a good reason for keeping this secret? That maybe they were protecting me. Protecting you. Mia stood, her own anger rising. By lying to you your entire life. By letting you believe that I had a father who loved me. Who chose me. Who stayed. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. Because that's what Dad did, Mia. He stayed. He raised me. He loved me. And now you're trying to take that away from me. The accusation hung heavy in the air between them. Mia took a step forward, reaching for her sister, but Ellie backed away. Elle, please. We can't just pretend none of this is happening. Watch me. Ellie turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and by the way. Mom gave me this to give to you. She tossed an envelope onto Mia's bed. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a restraining order. Sarah was legally blocking Mia from accessing any more family records or contacting relatives about Thomas Bennett. Mom's serious about stopping this, Ellie said quietly. And so am I. Let it go, Mia. Please. But after Ellie left, Mia pulled out her phone and opened the email she'd been afraid to show anyone. A response from a private investigator she'd contacted weeks ago, when she first found the photograph. Found your man, the email read. Thomas Bennett, died 2019 in Portland, Oregon. Left behind an interesting will. Call me. Mia's hands shook as she dialed the number. The investigator answered on the second ring. "Wondered when you'd call," his gruff voice came through. "Got something you might want to see. Bennett's will mentions an unnamed daughter, born 1990. Sets aside a trust fund for her. Never claimed." "How much?" Mia whispered. $2 million. But here's the kicker, there's a letter too. Sealed. Only to be opened by his biological daughter on her 21st birthday. Your sister's 21st birthday is coming up soon, isn't it? Mia sank onto her bed, mind racing. A letter. A trust fund. Proof, real, tangible proof of Thomas Bennett's connection to Ellie. But her sister's words echoed in her head, let it go. Could she? Should she? The weight of the decision pressed down on her like a physical thing. If she pursued this lead, she risked losing her sister's trust forever. But if she let it go, the truth would stay buried, along with that sealed letter and its unknown contents. Downstairs, she could hear her mother crying again. Her father's heavy footsteps crossed the hall to the guest room, paused, then continued past without stopping. And from Ellie's room came the faint sound of music, the same sad song on repeat, like a soundtrack to their unraveling lives. "Miss?" The investigator's voice brought her back to the present. "Should I send you the details?" Mia closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made her choice. The Portland rain hammered against Mia's rental car windows as she pulled up to the address the investigator had given her. She'd told her family she was visiting college campuses, another lie to add to the growing pile. But she was too close to stop now. Thomas Bennett's last residence was a modest craftsman house with a well-tended garden. A woman in her 60s answered the door, introducing herself as Margaret Bennett, Thomas's widow. "I've been expecting someone like you to show up eventually," Margaret said, leading Mia into a cozy living room. Family photos covered the walls, but Mia noticed they all seemed recent, nothing from before 2000. "Though I thought it would be the girl herself." "You knew about Ellie?" "Tom told me everything before we married." Margaret poured tea from a delicate china pot. "About Sarah, about the baby, about the choice they made. It haunted him his whole life." "What choice?" Mia leaned forward. "What really happened?" Margaret studied her for a long moment. "Your mother was young, ambitious, had her whole life ahead of her. Tom was married at the time, unhappily, but married. When Sarah got pregnant." She sighed. "They both knew a scandal would destroy multiple families. Your father, John, he was Sarah's best friend. He offered to marry her, to raise the child as his own. So they just, what? Pretended it never happened. Erased Thomas Bennett from existence. They thought they were doing the right thing." Margaret's voice was gentle. Tom's wife was vindictive, powerful. She would have made Sarah's life hell, dragged everything into the open. This way, the baby would have a stable home, 2 loving parents. "But he never forgot," Mia said. "The trust fund, the letter." "No, he never forgot. He watched from afar. Kept track of birthdays, graduations. Never interfered, but made sure there would be something waiting when the time came." Margaret stood and walked to a bookcase, removing an envelope from behind a row of books. "This arrived a month after he died. Instructions to give it to his daughter when she turned 21. The envelope was heavy, sealed with wax. Ellie's 21st birthday was in 3 weeks. "I shouldn't take this," Mia whispered. "Ellie doesn't want to know. She's made that very clear. Sometimes the truth demands to be heard, regardless of whether we're ready for it." Margaret pressed the envelope into Mia's hands. Tom spent 30 years respecting their choice. But in death, he wanted his daughter to have the option of knowing him, even if just through words on paper. As Mia drove back to her hotel, the envelope seemed to burn in her bag. She thought of Ellie's anger, her parents' pain, the careful life they'd constructed around this secret. Was she really willing to detonate it all? Her phone buzzed, a text from her father, "Your mother's in the hospital. Come home now." The world tilted on its axis. Mia's hands shook as she read the next messages, coming rapid fire. Anxiety attack. They're keeping her overnight. Ellie found your flight confirmation to Portland. She told Sarah where you'd gone. What have you done, Mia? The rain pounded harder as Mia pulled over, unable to see through her tears. She'd thought she was fighting for truth, for justice, for her sister's right to know her own story. But now, with her mother in the hospital and her family falling apart, she wondered if she'd been fighting for the wrong things all along. The envelope sat heavy in her bag, Thomas Bennett's last words to his daughter waiting to either heal or destroy what remained of their family. Next to it, her phone continued to buzz with messages she was afraid to read. She had a choice to make: continue home with the letter and face the consequences, or destroy it here and now, burying the truth once and for all. Either way, there would be no going back. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before Mia as she walked toward her mother's room, Thomas Bennett's letter weighing down her bag like a stone. She'd driven all night, the rain chasing her home, her father's words echoing in her head, "What have you done?" Outside the room, she found Ellie slumped in a plastic chair, eyes red from crying. Their father stood at the window, his reflection fractured in the rain-streaked glass. Neither looked at her as she approached. "How is she?" Mia's voice sounded strange in the sterile silence. "Stable," Ellie answered flatly. "The doctor says it was a severe panic attack. They're keeping her for observation." "Elle, I'm so sorry. I never meant dash. Save it." Ellie finally looked at her, eyes hard. "You got what you wanted, didn't you? Found all your answers in Portland?" John turned from the window. "Margaret Bennett called. Told us you'd been there." His voice was tired, defeated. "I suppose you have the letter?" Mia nodded, tears blurring her vision. "I do. But I also learned something else. About why you did what you did." She pulled out the envelope and held it out to her father. His hands trembled slightly as he took it. "Dad," she said softly, "you weren't just Mom's best friend who stepped in to help. You were in love with her, weren't you? Even then." The question hung in the air. John stared at the envelope, running his thumb over the wax seal. "I'd loved her since college," he finally admitted. "Watched her fall for Tom, watched that whole mess unfold. When she came to me, crying, pregnant, terrified of what his wife would do to her." He swallowed hard. "Yes, I offered to marry her. But not just to help. Because I loved her. Because I wanted to give both of them, a real family." "And you did," Ellie's voice cracked. "You really did." Sarah's voice drifted weakly from the hospital bed. "John." They all turned. She looked small against the white sheets, monitors beeping softly beside her. "I hear Margaret called," she said. "So now everyone knows." "Not everything," Mia said. She took the envelope back from her father and approached the bed. "This is for you, Ellie. From Thomas Bennett." His last words to his daughter. "But it's your choice whether to read it." Ellie stood frozen, staring at the envelope. "Did you read it?" "No. Because I finally realized something. This isn't my truth to uncover. It's yours. And whatever you decide, to read it or burn it, I'll support you." Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks as she reached for John's hand. He took it, squeezing gently. "There's something else," Mia continued. "A trust fund. $2 million. Also your choice." Ellie sat on the edge of her mother's bed, the envelope trembling in her hands. "Mom. Dad. What do you think I should do?" "This has to be your decision, sweetheart," John said. His voice was thick with emotion. But know this, whatever you choose, whatever that letter says, you are my daughter. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. By love. Every day for the past 21 years, I've chosen to be your father. And I'll keep choosing it, every day forward. Sarah struggled to sit up. I'm so sorry, baby. We thought we were protecting you. But maybe we were really protecting ourselves, from pain, from scandal, from change. You deserve to know your own story. Ellie looked down at the envelope, then at each of their faces, her mother's tear-stained cheeks, her father's unwavering love, her sister's remorseful determination. Finally, she broke the seal. The room held its breath as she read, the only sound the steady beeping of monitors and the distant rumble of thunder. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and wiped her eyes. He loved me, she said simply. Enough to let me go. Enough to give me a better life than he could offer. She turned to John. But he could never have given me a better father. She held out the letter to him. Would you like to read it? John shook his head, pulling her into a tight embrace. That was for you, sweetheart. Your story, your truth. Mia watched as her parents enfolded Ellie in their arms, their tears mingling, decades of secrets finally washing away. The truth hadn't destroyed them after all. It had stripped away the lies, yes, exposed the painful choices and hidden love and sacrifice. But underneath, it had revealed something stronger, a family bound not by blood or obligation, but by choice. By love that had survived secrets, survived lies, survived truth itself. Outside, the rain finally began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds. A new day dawning, full of possibilities. They would need time to heal, to rebuild trust, to find their way forward in this new reality. But they would do it together, stronger for having faced the truth at last. Ellie reached for Mia's hand, pulling her into the family embrace. Thank you, she whispered. For not letting me hide from who I am. And in that moment, surrounded by the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of their family, Mia finally understood, sometimes the greatest act of love isn't protecting someone from the truth, but helping them find the courage to face it.